Damn it, Kathie. That wasn't the way we planned it. At least you didn't spill my water. Like my younger sister just said, I'm Melanie Hammet. I wrote a series of songs about urban planning and put them on a CD called Edifice Complex. This is a song about good street planning, and what happens when it's neighbor to neighbor, street to street, traffic to traffic, etc. to etc. It's called Anatomy of the Street Where You Live. There's just enough shade. There's just enough light. There's just enough room for the neighbors in the middle of a hot summer night. There's just enough room for a car to pass, but it has to slow down. It's the perfect little street, the perfect little spot, the perfect little town. There's just enough them. There's just enough us. There's just enough. I got what I need, you got what you need, so don't fuss. There's just enough not in my backyard, so it has to slow down. It's the perfect little street, the perfect little spot, the perfect little town. Wow. Early morning in a bathrobe, going for the paper. Kids are on their way to carpool, waving at the neighbor. You know they're waving at the neighbor. There's just enough shade,
canopy,
just enough light, density, just enough room for the neighbor in the middle of a hot summer night. Community, there's just enough room for a car to pass, but it has to slow down. It's the perfect little street, the perfect little spot, the perfect little town. There's just enough them,
diversity,
just enough us,
security,
just enough. I got what I need, you got what you need, so don't fuss.
economy,
And there's just enough not in my backyard, so it all has to slow down. It's the perfect little street, the perfect little spot, the perfect little town. There we go.
So like most cities, Pine Lake has streets and neighbors in the streets. Oh, thank you. I don't know if you should give that to me, quite frankly. I don't think I can be trusted with it. Thank you. But I wanted to set the stage by talking a little bit about Pine Lake, Georgia. It was founded 75 years ago as a blue-collar resort where for $69.95 you could buy a 20-foot lot to put up a little fishing cottage or a tent. And we still have one lot that's still 20 feet wide. There's only 800 people who live there, more or less. It's in the greater Atlanta area. It's just east of downtown. It's 3.3 square miles. That's a little more than 500 acres. And a lot of those acres are green space. It's mostly residential. We have an 11-acre lake. We have a constructed wetlands with trails that run through that and past the lake. We have a beach where you can swim in the summer. We have a playground. As I said, we have a lot of green space. And we're a tree city with maybe 65% canopy cover, which means it's very cool there. Of course, we knew it was very cool there. But there are a lot of artists there, and there are a lot of artists and community activities there. There's a monthly pancake breakfast. There's monthly coffee houses with music. There's an annual arts festival. There's an annual theater summer camp. We turned the courthouse into a gallery. Most of this was citizen initiated, not by the government, but by people who were just working and living in the town. It's a small city. It's less than $1 million budget. And we have, I think, 6 full-time staff members and 2 part-time staff members. It's a mayor and 5 city council members. So Melanie is one of the 5 city council members ever since 2005, 6,
something like
5, something like that, for 8 years. Her second term is up this year. So Melanie, why did you decide to do this anyway?
Why did I decide to run for elected office? Well, I don't know if Annette Perkins is in the room. She was my high school government teacher. So I blame her, but in actuality, when I moved to Pine Lake, it was a tiny place and you could see the bones of how things got done. And you could see the cause and effect loop in action. And I felt like it was a way of getting involved that was helping to push the ball up the hill. And I never assumed that I would become a politician. I never thought of myself as an elected official. I just thought of it as essentially another form of volunteering with a lot more complications involved. So that's really what got me started. I have to wonder about anybody who would be willing to be mayor of Pine Lake. So Kathie, why in the world did you run?
Well, I had been running Alternate Routes, which is a regional service organization I think it was from 88 to 96. And during that period, those of you who are old enough will recall that there was a great furor around the National Endowment for the Arts. That was the period of the NEA 4, Serrano, Mapplethorpe. There was a lot, artists were taking a lot of grief, and the National Endowment for the Arts was in particular taking a lot of grief. But in my capacity as the director of Roots, I was invited to a lot of national forums and asked to speak about whatever I felt like speaking about. And what I felt like speaking about was the fact that what I observed in a lot of artists was, I thought, all too willing embrace of sort of a victim mentality. Oh, they're picking on us. We don't have any money. Oh, they're taking away our funding. And it was not quite that whiny, don't get me wrong. But what struck me about it was the complete sense of, or lack of sense of agency and power that these artists might have over their own conditions. So I began, in my uniquely self-righteous way, to encourage people from the podium to say, you should, get involved in your local government, run for the school board, the library board. Artists have to be engaged. We have to be part of the community. And I have a long history as a community artist, so for me that was very real. You can't just, complain. You have to really get in there and be part of the civic discourse, so run for office. And then finally, 2 things happened. I began to realize, well, if I'm giving all this advice to other people, I mean, am I going to? And then I moved to a town where I could actually get elected. So then I realized the time had come. And so this was, I think, in 2002. And the city was coming out of a very rancorous, bitter period of political transition. And like a crazy person, I thought, gee, I think I could do something to straighten this out. And there's more to that story. But I did run for city council in 2002. I served 2 terms. And then 2 years or a year and a half ago, abandoned my post so that I could run for mayor. I do like to say that I ran unopposed. And the other 2 people who were running for council also ran unopposed. So what you may not know about government is that it costs money to have an election. You have to print the ballots or the technology or software. You have to pay the electors. You have to, an election is not cheap. So we decided not to hold an election, save a couple of grand. So I'm very proud to be the mayor of a city where nobody ever elected me, cast 1 vote for me. So anyway. But it has engendered a lot of thought about the nature of leadership. Who is a leader? How do you lead? And how do you lead a town of 800, which is, smaller than a lot of your neighborhoods. It's very dense, and people know each other, but there's just not a lot of, it's 800 people. So the challenges of leadership are something that I think we both continue to sort of grapple with, how we take, you know, how we change our stance around leadership, that sometimes it's like, let's go over there. And then sometimes it's like, well, where would you all like to go? We can go anywhere. And sometimes it's just like, oh no, we're not going there. And so those are all different sort of modes of leadership, all of which we have to be nimble and sort of, you know, flex through all those different ways of being a leader. So making laws, we were going to talk about that for a minute, weren't we?
Yes, we were. And as a matter of fact, one of the ways that I sort of teach myself leadership, perhaps, if it's that lofty, is to write songs that sort of help me understand and perhaps, did you switch over from my lavalier to the other microphone? Here I am.
There you go.
Anyway, one of the ways that I teach myself about leadership and that I practice my leadership, as I said, if you want to call it that lofty, is through songwriting. So what I mean by this is when I was first on city council, obviously, even at that small a level, part of the job is to write law. And as a person who calls himself an artist, I don't particularly like rules, much less law, much less writing law. And I have some skepticism and suspicion about what law can do and can be. So this is a song that I wrote in part to sort of work with myself on the balance of the necessity of structure and the queasiness I feel every single time I cite an ordinance. The song is called 175, and I'll sing it for you, and then I'll tell you the story of where this song actually comes from, the origins of it. Three killing things I ever saw: a snake, a gun, and a crooked law. One waits in the pocket, one waits in the bush, and one lies waiting on the government books. 175, 175. A gun will shoot, a snake will strike, but a law can twist a country like a knife. A gun don't pay, a snake don't vote. A twisted law is made by both. A snake will hiss, a gun will smoke. Some laws are spinning wheels on a crooked spoke. 175, 175. A gun will shoot, a snake will strike, but a law can twist a country like a knife. Don't tread on me, don't aim for me, don't say it's not the same for me. Don't tread on me, don't aim for me, don't say it's not the same for me. A law protects, a law defends, but who that is, I guess it all depends. 175, 175. A gun will shoot, a snake will strike, but a law can twist a country like a knife. That song comes from actually a documentary called Paragraph 175, which is a paragraph, a piece of text in the German law books that predates the Nazis. And when the Nazis came to power, they discovered Paragraph 175, and it gave them the legal standing to put homosexuals in concentration camps. So that's what 175 it means.
So you might be wondering when we're going to talk about art a little more. So now we will, other than having heard these great songs. So we wanted to approach this as in a little different frame than art and culture are often talked about in civic discourse or governments or community building, what have you. Often art and culture are talked about either a product, the mural, the community play, the poetry reading, or as a process that supports civic engagement, creating a community vision, planning and zoning, a number of activities that government might be involved with, a driving force for change, encouraging more participatory democracy. But we came at it a little bit different to think about what is it about the essence of the artist's, what is the artist's essence as a person that is useful when it comes to government. So it's not about what comes out, it's not about how you get there, but it's really about what is that generative power that produces this work. And other people have written about this, and I'm sure there's a much longer list, and maybe you can suggest some other things. But when I thought about it, there were maybe half a dozen things that I thought, that's what artists do, and that's what government needs. And so here we are trying to connect the two. I mean, chiefly, artists are about solving problems. That's part of our DNA. That's perfect. We have a sense of curiosity and wonder and the what if, and what would happen, We have the ability and often the embrace of limitations or constrictions. I think that having those limitations is actually very useful for an artistic process, but I think the comfort with that is something that artists are very familiar with. Like, these are, I only have this, the canvas is this big, or the wall is this big, or I have this much time. I think that, especially for a community-based artist like myself and someone who that for decades really worked with community theater, I and other artists have a great ability to work with volunteers wherever they are on the scale of skill, time, inclination or whatever, and to work with groups. So I think that the artist's DNA includes a facilitative mode of getting people to work together, especially for the community-based artist. There's a couple of other things that I'll just mention really quickly. One is, this sort of goes without saying, but embrace of innovation and a fearlessness about trying something new that nobody ever thought of, or they maybe thought of it, but it didn't seem a good idea, let's try it anyway. And then being able to communicate a vision, and not just the vision that the artist has in their head, but also the ability to collaboratively build a vision. So this, to me, is part of my birthright as a community artist. And these attributes have absolutely, down the line, made it possible for me to govern now for 9 years without wanting to slit my throat or others, or not, without me acting on it. There are times.
Indeed.
So.
Well, we're about to show you a very short, I think 1 minute and 21 second movie, and this is another perhaps utility that a creative vision, or at least a ridiculous sense of humor, when applied to a subject like dredging the lake, which is what we had to do, what happens when you combine those two things? So in brief, we dredged our lake, and the geographic and probably emotional center of our city is our little 11-acre lake. So for a good deal of time, what we had was kind of a moon crater in the center of everybody's activity. And so I took on writing a kind of a blog to let people know what was happening blow by blow with You know, where were the fish going? When were they coming back? You know, what happened to the trees? What did the kids think about having a big mud puddle in the middle of the lake? You can probably guess what they thought. Anyway, and I called it the Dredge Report. And so we're going to show you just a short movie that I assembled when we started restocking the lake. And I have to say, so we were going to have this delivery of 5,000 fish to our lake. And the whole city was delighted. I mean, couldn't believe we were going to have this big event, and we assumed this giant tanker truck was going to come in with 5,000 fish, maybe even several tanker trucks. 5,000 fish! And so we had this collection of neighbors who came down to the side of the lake, brought their kids. It was going to be a big deal. Well, when you stock a lake with 5,000 baby fish, they come in some sacks that you just carry down to the edge and you pour it out into the water. So it was not the dramatic big event that we had hoped for, but I think it made a pretty good little short movie. So we'll watch that.
Come along and follow me to the bottom of the sea. We'll join in the jamboree at the codfish ball. Lobsters.
It was awesome. It was the most incredible release of fish I have ever seen in my life. And I can say that honestly.
Then Hattie leads the eel through an Irish reel. The catfish is a dancing man, but he can't catch.
I could barely contain my excitement.
About what?
The fish. Leaving the bucket.
There won't be a hook in sight at the codfish ball. Come along and follow me to the bottom of the sea.
Pretty cool.
Well, I think that we're pretty happy that they're back in the lake so that we can see more of them.
You like fish?
To and fro at the codfish ball. Then Hattie leads the eel through an Irish reel. The catfish is a dancing man, but he can't like the sardine can.
Yes. So that was our 5,000 fish release back into our lake. I know you guys didn't applaud for the 5,000 fish. How could you not? Yeah, bluegills and minnows.
And in another year, you can come and fish there, but not yet, because they're still little, except the ones that have escaped from the creek, and they're big. So Melanie mentioned about the sense of humor, and you can see it there. And we wanted to close just by talking about sort of what has made it possible for us to keep doing this work. I mean, this is not our day job, so there has to be something to sustain, and the sense of humor is definitely one of them. But I wanted to just mention in closing, and then Melanie will close us out for good, is that one of the things that actually I feel saved my life in the first year of my elected career, when I had, as I mentioned earlier, gone in with like, oh, I can fix this, yes, I can help fix this, and tried like hell and just kept running up against
Human nature.
human nature. I didn't get the memo about that. But I read a book that really did shift the way I began to think about governance and really in a certain way about the work that I do in the world. And I just want to mention it because it really did, I felt like something shifted inside. And that's a book by Margaret Wheatley called Leadership in the New Science. And she talks about how we are hardwired in a certain way to believe in cause and effect, that Newton ideal of you knock over the glass and it falls down. But in the new science, which is quantum physics, there's something else at work. There's this mysterious field of connections and attractions and forces that we are just really beginning to understand. And it didn't make the glass not fall over, but in another universe it might have. But what Margaret Wheatley taught me was that, and in her book she says this, is that if you run up against a brick wall, then you have to start thinking about your work in a different way. And that's about working in the field and doing the best work of whatever it is you know how to do that work as well as you can. And know that somehow in these mysterious ways they're connected to what else is happening. And if you perform that way, if you are certain that there is a quantum reality, then that will begin to shift the way you look at how you operate and what your agency is in the world. So I just wanted to mention that because it was a fundamental internal shift for me, and it was absolutely necessary for me not to lose my damn mind. So, Melanie, what saved your life?
Well, have I switched over yet to the other microphone? Well, clearly, as I said earlier, the way that I sort of synthesize particularly difficult concepts is I write songs about them, and then I teach myself, I suppose you could say. But when I first began being an elected official, I think a thing that struck me immediately was the difference between networks and community. And there's a great book on that, the title of which I can't remember, nor the author. But believe you me, it's a great book, changed my life. So in that sort of pondering of the difference between networks, which I had operated in, and then my commitment to a community of folks that I may or may not vote alike, I may or may not even care to speak to, but by God, they'll be there to, help clean the lake or cook a pancake at the pancake breakfast or what have you. I started thinking about, sort of that reciprocity, I guess you could say, of value, placing value on the life that we are all trying to live together. And so I wrote this song. It's called Hammer. And it's about all that stuff I just said, but it's a lot easier to sing. Well, when all you got is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And when all you got is the wind, everything looks like a sail. But you is who you is, you be who you be. The end of the nose is as far as you see. When all you got is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And when all you got is an automobile, everything looks like a road. When all you are is a princess, well, everybody looks like a toad. But you is who you is, you be who you be. The end of the nose is as far as you see. When all you got is an automobile, everything looks like a road. This is a quantum song. I just noticed that. I don't even know what that means. And when all you are is a shipwreck, well, everybody looks like an island. When all you do is holler and yell, everybody else looks silent. But you is who you is, you be who you be. And the end of the nose is as far as you see. When all you are is a shipwreck, well, everybody looks like an island. True. And when all you got is religion, well, everybody else is going to hell. When all you're doing is preaching, everybody else is someone to tell. But you is who you is, and you be who you be. And the end of the nose, as far as you see. When all you got is religion, well, everybody else is going to hell. And now all I got is a guitar, so everything looks like a song. And if the verse I sing is
Number 5.
I guess it's gone on way too long. But I is who I is, I be who I be. The end of my nose is as far as I see. So all I got is a guitar, so everything looks like a song. I said all I got is a guitar, so everything looks like a song, like a song, like a song, like a song.
Thank you.
Kathie and Melanie, your talk has helped frame the next part of this evening's program, your interview and your conversation with our audience this evening. Marcy, a member of the Community Voices team, will engage you with some questions that will help us look more closely at government, governance, the arts, and community change. Marcy.
Thank you. Okay, Pine Lake, as you've described it, is a very unique community, and as I've experienced it, it's, let's say, quirky, and a very small, intimate community. What do you think makes Pine Lake uniquely suited for the arts and arts for community governance?
I'll start. I think one of the elements that this is kind of an odd, maybe a counterintuitive answer, but in the center of our city is the lake, and it takes up, it's a relative to the size of the city, it's a big lake, and so it's kind of an attractor for unusual meetings, unusual conversations, sort of serendipitous moments, and I think that really drives a whole lot of sort of creative surprises.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I would add that one of the things that you need to know about Pine Lake is that it's a rectangle, and 3 of the 4 sides are closed. There are fences, creeks, so it's landlocked in a certain way. There's only one road, so there's only one way. There's 3 entrances and only 2 exits. It's not good feng shui. But there's something about the geography, which I think is just an accident, but as you turn off this main road, which is very busy and a little junky, to be honest, it's not what we want quite yet, you go down a hill and you literally leave this urban character behind you, and you drive down to this extremely heavily wooded, a lot of older sort of cottagey houses that have gotten built onto, so it's a very quirky vernacular architecture. It doesn't look like any place in Atlanta. And so you drive through this canopy of trees, then all of a sudden there's this lake right in the middle of it. And then you go on the other side, and that's where we live, but in separate houses. But there's just something about that protected, that sort of becoming that little crucible for protecting the quirk, if you will. And so that when you drive in, I still do this. I drive in any time of the year, really. I turn off the radio, and I roll down my window, and I slow down to about 5 miles an hour. Because it's like all of a sudden you're in the country. It's very wonderful and weird, but it's... So I think that it has attracted artists because it has this character of just being in another time and place. It's a little tiny bit magical. Mm-hmm. And I think that, like begets like. There are a lot of artists there. They have attracted a lot of artists there. There are a lot of gay and lesbian people there. We have attracted other people there. So it has just become this like crystallizing, the crystals are gathering around this, this place. And when you think about the whole thing about placemaking and belonging, I think it's, in a certain way, it's the geography. Mm-hmm. But,
Okay. Great. And talk about artists, artists as citizens. In what ways do artists, beyond elected officials, contribute to your community?
In all ways.
Kathie, would you like to start on that
well,
one?
there's really not anything they don't. I mean, we have a very highly engaged volunteer base, and a lot of those people are either professional artists or people who, enjoy an avocational pursuit. And there's no sense of preciousness or apertness about their work. They just do it, and then they just come help us do other things like pick up leaves or, drag the trash out of the street, out of the stream, if that's what we need to do. Or, so I would say that also, because we have these arts activities, I think people have really claimed them for their own. So there's a high degree of ownership about the arts festival and the summer camp and the coffee house and the gallery. And we do an annual community art event that people actually, it's community built. It's actually sort of wonderful. And all that's just, sort of in the fabric.
Yeah, and I'd like to actually, you know, we've been talking for the last 18, 20 minutes about artists, and I think I'd like to maybe shift and maybe open it up to, say, creatives. We have a high population of creatives, and I'd like to open it up even further and say crackpots. So, well, let's just be all inclusive, and I would include myself in that latter category even sooner perhaps than a creative or an artist. Anyway.
In your role in the town council and as mayor, what kind of things surprised you most in acceding to that role?
In what?
In assuming that role,
Yeah.
what kind of things surprised you most?
I had gone to Kathie when I was thinking about running for elected office, and I said, you know, what advice do you have? I'm thinking about doing this. And she said, the learning curve is vertical. And I believed her, but I had no idea how vertical it actually continues to be. I mean, the layers of sort of esoteric and arcane skill sets that we've had to develop. I mean, Kathie has been reading about addling goose eggs, for example, and I know more about string bank restoration than any guitar player should ever know. And I also now know how to run a tractor. So it was surprising to me how exciting and interesting the learning curve is.
Stormwater management. Woo! That sounds wildly exciting.
Right.
Well, this is true. I mean, I think actually it's one of the things that actually appeals to me about it is that in terms of, you know, being a person who's sort of intellectually curious and just wants to know how a lot of things work, running a city, there's a lot of moving pieces. So you're learning about insurance liability issues, standard operating police process, stormwater management, wildlife management. Ask us about the beavers later. And I'll also say, but honestly, the thing that surprised me most, and I'm sorry to say this, was how soon I heard they, as opposed, you know, to the we. That they are trying to do this to the city. They are trying to do that. It's like, what they? This they? Really? This is where we're going with this conversation. And I was taken aback and really shocked about how quick, you know, how soon I heard that. So part of my whole, you know, just mantra is just turning the them and us into the we again.
And I would imagine 800 people living in very close lots might have strong opinions about the way their city
They are
runs.
experts on everything.
Yeah. We have 800. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Right. We have very strong opinions, all 800 of we.
Did you find that as artists that you were able to, you brought any sort of unique skills to addressing those strong opinions?
I think, you know, when you sing sort of your point of view, it can be at least entertaining, if not irresistible. But I also think that we have this peculiar, I don't know if it's in the water or where this comes from, but a high proportion of our residents are hilariously funny. So we have this sort of strange citywide sense of humor, and it has saved our ass over and over and over again. I wasn't supposed to say ass, I'm sorry. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't need to add to that.
Okay. What is the most unusual thing that you have done as an elected official?
Let's see. Well, the most recent unusual thing was learning to drive the tractor so that I could water the newly planted trees, and hauling a giant tank of water behind the tractor in the wetlands very carefully so we didn't crush the flora and fauna to keep those trees alive. And I never thought I would learn to drive a tractor in the name of being on a city council.
I don't even know how to answer that. I'll have to pass.
Okay. Oh, wait, I do know that the most recent unusual thing was when I actually threw my elected official weight around and got to demolish a house on a giant excavator. So that was, yeah, that was what I did.
Yeah. Yeah, that was, I didn't get to do it, but I got to watch it.
That was a good one.
Sounds
Yeah,
like a
That was a
beautiful
happy
thing.
moment.
Yeah. Okay, well, we'd like to open up the floor to anyone who would like to ask questions of Kathie and Melanie. So please join us in the second row.
You mentioned that Pine Lake started as a working class resort
For whites.
for whites. Are all of these artists and creatives a mark of gentrification, or is there still economic diversity?
There's actually a pretty good bit of economic diversity. There really
And is it in terms of working class, or just because some artists are poor?
Yes. I'm not sure.
In other words, are there blue collar workers there and stuff like that still?
I think so, yeah. And we, in addition to the housing stock, I mean, one of the things that you should know is, you know, the fishing cottages are generally one story. And there was a little window when people began to come in and tear the one-story houses down and build three-story houses. And that's when the alarm bells went off, and we said, if we let this continue, we will have, it will completely wreck our particular, you know, vibration. So that's when we developed an architectural review board and put into place some new codes that limit height to a story and a half. What that has done actually is to drive some people away who would be capable of paying for a three-story house and imagine that they really need 3 stories and they can't build 3 stories. So they don't come. So in a certain way, I think it has protected, but it's an ongoing question because as we have to raise the millage rates to compensate for the loss of the ad valorem, you know, the tax, you all know this probably, you know, the property values have plummeted and the amount that we get is tied to what the county says the houses are worth. And when that goes down, our revenues go down. So the only way we can stay even, not even increase, but stay even, is to raise the millage rate. And for some people, a very few number that's been a kick in the pocketbook. Everybody else is sort of holding on, but you know, I haven't looked at the 2010 economic data from the census, so I don't really. But my sense is that there are a lot of people I see every morning trudging up the hill towards the bus stop to get on the bus to go somewhere. So I know that we have a fair number of people who
I think our median income in the city is $40,000.
Okay.
That was the last I heard a couple of weeks ago.
So I don't know if that answers your question.
And then you mentioned that it started out as a white working class resort. Is it still uniform in terms of race, or has that changed?
That's changed. We're about 60% Caucasian and maybe the balance being people of color, mostly African American, some Hispanic. It's interesting, so we're majority white, but we are in a majority black county. So that when you look at the demographics of the city in relationship to its surrounding county, it's much whiter. And part of that, I think, is the legacy of those early exclusionary policies. I think it's slowly changing. I mean, I think it's slowly changing, but it will be slow to change.
Sounds like it's still much more integrated than the rest of Atlanta.
Atlanta's pretty diverse. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the city is, you know, it's, yeah, you know, Atlanta, the metropolitan statistical area is 26 counties. And some of those counties are pretty white.
The person in the, is it Susan? Hi.
I just wondered if you could share an issue that looked really difficult to solve, that maybe had a creative resolution that surprised you, or, you know, that reinforced your feeling about working with creative, artistic people?
Let's see. Well, I would say, the one that comes to mind is actually a really tiny thing. We had a community, we're going to build a community playground. And through Kaboom, I don't know if you're familiar with the Kaboom agency, so it was going to be community built for the community. And so the group that had driven the bus on it was going to put the playground, we have a little beach, they were going to put the playground smack in the middle of the beach because there was a problem over on the far side of the beach where it made sense. There was a sort of a concrete platform that had been built for something that was long ago had been abandoned. So it was really kind of a terrible thing. We were going to have this peculiar playground with a little beach here and a little beach there and a concrete block thing over here. And what I thought was really amazing was it was looking like there was really no way to solve this problem. And it sounds small, but again, remember the lake is the center of sort of the heart of the community, and this playground was going to be in the center of the beach. And when Kathie was talking about sort of the quantum field, I call that the Johnny Coe effect, because we had a guy who he talked a friend of his into bringing in I guess a backhoe or some piece of heavy machinery, and voluntarily tore out this large concrete pad so that the playground could be moved. And it was at the 11th hour. I mean, I think we were within 3 days of starting the community build. Now that's creative in a different way, I think, than what you're talking about. It sort of, in my mind, came out of left field because, I mean, this guy was not a parent. He was not part of the group that was putting together the playground build. He was just a resident who saw that we were about to have this kind of unfortunate positioning of this playground, and he got down there with, and this is a small city, so he didn't have to go through a lot of red tape and a lot of hoops and a lot of permissions and a lot of. So he just got down there with a piece of heavy equipment and, by God, tore that concrete pad up and removed it and took it out of the city. That really affected me because I thought, at the 11th hour, when things look absolutely impossible, there's a Johnny Coe, or I'm sure Kathie has other people she could name, who'll come out of nowhere and solve a sort of unsolvable situation. And I've seen that happen again and again. That's the one that I really kind of go to as this sort of miraculous last moment solve. Is there one that you can think of?
I don't think it's quite as dramatic as like, oh, there's a beautiful, creative, artistic solution. But I think that the sensibility and the willingness to just live with the ambiguity and let things sort of evolve, I think that has undergirded a lot of sort of our collective problem solving. It's not a really great answer, but I feel like that it's just, it's sort of, we just try to do things with, an artistic lens on, and sometimes it's helpful, but there's never for me, there's not like this moment of like, aha, arts to the rescue. It's a little more organic than that.
That's interesting because, Kathie, I'm sure you're well aware of the trend and the numerous studies that talk about arts for community transformation. But it sounds like transformation is a much more subtle process than that.
Yeah, for me, that is a very, that's a problematic construct because I don't think it recognizes what, it doesn't make explicit what a theory of change is. And I think that's something I have thought something about. And so it's not like this transformation. How does that happen? I mean, you don't just change a policy and all of a sudden things are different. You can change people and things won't be the same. So how do you make that through line between individual transformation through organizational, neighborhoods, groups, subgroups, ad hoc groups, to structural and systemic change that's sort of held in place by a policy decision. So this transformation is, I always question that. It's like how long, how does that last? And You know, in my own experience, I ran a theater in North Carolina that when I left it, it was about this size actually. It's an old vaudeville house. It was a place where people in the community came to perform for each other. And it was a place that was full every single night because people wanted to see each other and support their work. And it was this real nexus of great neighbor. It's a small town, 3,000 people. But now, 30 years later, well, no, 20 years later, after, you know, things have changed. And you go there now, and what are they doing? They're hiring, you know, professional actors with equity cards to perform on the stage. And the people still come, but there's not that sense of emotional connection of like, oh, that's my postmaster, or oh, that's my Sunday school teacher. That excitement that really got people, you know, so happy to bring their visiting aunt to the theater to see this is our theater. And that's not in place anymore. So all of this talk about community transformation, in a certain, I think it's great, but part of me goes, let's just wait and see. Let's wait and see. And the jury's still out on a lot of that stuff, I think.
Melanie, do you have any thoughts about the way arts can impact change in communities?
No, actually I don't.
Okay, fair enough. All right, well, we would really like to thank you all tonight.